Hello everyone, today in this video we will fight against the atmosphere character of our world around us, and today we will talk about general situation. General situation today means the crisis of crises, and I have to tell you that many people, including me, for many years, at least 10, for sure double digits number of years, were warning that if current trends, demography, uh, economical politics, social politics like welfare state in many states, financial politics, so that we don't have any reference point with the to the number of amount of actually I should say now not number amount of money we produce. So there is no gold parity or no parity at all since 1971, since the time when President Nixon temporarily needed a little bit more money for the war of Vietnam. The parity of gold was cancelled in 1971, and we know that very often temporary solutions are very permanent, and unfortunately this one, because it's comfortable for many people, it's very permanent, and we have it till now. That's why they are, especially during last 2 years, they are printing people like printing money like crazy, really like crazy. And we see now inflation and other stuff. So we have economical crisis, we have demographic crisis. Since 10 years or a little bit more, I was saying about 10-12 years ago, if demographic trends in many places are not inverted, we will run into deep trouble. And these troubles are not only sociological, not only demographic, not only financial, not only economical, but due to the mass migrations of labor force. And not only, many countries have also identity crisis, cultural crisis, and more integrity crisis, because they are losing it. So now we see that, especially during last 2 years, some things are facilitated due to the uncontrolled, sometimes controlled, sometimes not, uncontrolled events, panics, and irrational behavior on a massive scale. That's why the crisis of crises is really going. And on the top of that, what I mentioned, all of these crises like economical, demographic, integrity crisis for many countries, identity crisis, ethnic and religious clashes. On the top of that, unfortunately, we have really incompetent politicians above who are making the decisions, plus people who influence their decisions, like guys from so-called economic forum, that it's really far from real economy, it's ideology forum it should be called. And we have also such guys like the distributor and propagator of the most common operating system for the PCs and laptops, that I don't use. As you know, I use Linux. And we should say also that another problem is the fact that our education system is also collapsing, and due to the welfare state, people are not used to work hard enough to get their share and earn their money. So difficult times are coming, and due to these factors what I mentioned, once they come, they will be even more difficult for these people. Many of these people will not make it. Another problem is that I don't see any idea among this uh, political business elite in quotation of our world. I'm not saying cultural political elite, because they don't have anything in common with culture, because to have something in common with culture, one needs to be able to create something. They are not. They are only squeezing money now from nothing. And of course, as I mentioned in some of my previous video, now we are mainly ruling by the managers of big corporations and other companies, because about 50-60 years ago such a phenomenon happened that owners slowly got dissected from their own companies, and they just delegated ruling them to the managers who have 3, 4, 5 years max the terms that they need to uh, increase the income of the company, so they do everything just to do it, and later escape, because and they do, because this is their only goal, and they do not look at the consequences, about the uh, long-term consequences. No one thinks in this world. This is another reason why we are collapsing, and this is what I see. This is the crisis of crises, and the, in some sense, not fully, but in some sense, analogy I can find in this what happened at the turn of 13th and 12th century before Christ, when the Bronze Age civilizations really bloom, really flourishing ones, were destroyed by the series of crises, also crisis of the crisis. Egypt survived, for instance, due to the great military campaign, defensive military campaign of the country against so-called peoples of the sea. Yeah, in the future I will also try to tell you a story how I interpret these events, but briefly, uh, many people from the Western Europe and western part of Mediterranean Sea were forced by some events. I think it was natural catastrophe, for sure, forced to migrate in great numbers into the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea, and many countries like uh, city-states in Syria or great empire of Hittites literally collapsed. They couldn't survive the flow of these militant migrants, and from the preserved cuneiform script text on clay tablets, we can clearly see that they were also facing a lot of economic difficulties that later resulted in famine, really crisis of transportation, crisis of agriculture, and in general collapse of economy. And these countries couldn't stand it in connection, everything in connection with this huge migration and actually huge invasions of determined, frustrated invaders from the West that were kicked out from their previous territories by great natural disaster, about which I will talk in some of the future movies. That I have some of I have a idea how one can interpret it. So they are called in official scholarship as the peoples of the sea. So many empires and city-states completely collapsed and were burned to the ground. As I said, Egypt survived, and luckily, partially thanks to this, not fully, but partially thanks to this, civilization in this part of the world survived. And for many regions, including Greece, Anatolia, part of Syria, also part of Mesopotamia, luckily not fully, not all Mesopotamia, we have so-called Dark Ages, because everything, almost everything, had to be rebuilt, and to many places new populations of people came, absorbing the residual populations of their predecessors on these territories who survived this Armageddon. Yes, we can use this word. And I think we are heading at similar crisis of crises, but in contrast to us, the previous civilization of the Bronze Age didn't make stupid, from this what we know, and this is for sure, didn't make stupid experiments like we with so-called green energy, or reversing the roles of the genders of the family and denying basic biology. But despite the fact that they were not doing it, so they were not so much advanced in stupidity like we, they collapsed completely. So if current trends, and I don't think it will happen quickly, are not inverted, I mean economical, sociological, demographical, then we are heading to the cumulation of the crisis of crises, so to the collapse. Have a nice day. Bye.